G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and today we're going to be painting this nobleman from an announcer pack I made called the Sleazy Nobleman, and it's just a bit of a different sort of painting drawing process that I wanted to go through, so I hope through the course of the video you get an idea of it. Now I can't go into extensive detail, so I will link to a few helpful videos that go into some of the techniques that I've used in more detail, such as clipping masks and using overlays to paint grayscale images. Anyways, getting started, we start as we always start with the construction lines, so doing the rough sort of outlines of the potential sort of face I was going for. Now those who were a bit clever with it did pick up that I based it on Matt Berry's face, and some other people have pointed out that it looks a bit like Jack Black, but anyway, very caricaturized sort of face, big cheeks, big jaw and chin, big fat nose, and very expressive eyebrows and all of that, and then wrapped up in the nobleman suit. So we've got the very curly sort of collar thing, and we've got the sash and all these things, and it comes together to get the look that I want. So using those rough lines, and once I've got the basic look, I'm going to get ready to add some color, but I can't add color yet because I'm going to do shading first. So I get a mid-tone gray and I go around and use an outline around the shape of the character, and once I've done the outline and I've filled it in, I use a clipping mask so that I can shade inside that grey, and from there I select a slightly darker tone of grey and I go through and very roughly do some shadows. Now this looks ugly very quickly, so be warned that if you're going to use this painting method in Photoshop or whatever program you use, it takes a while for it to end up looking the way you want it to look. This picture took me about an hour and a half to do. So going through, you can see how very blocky it looks, but we're just getting through the very broad sections of dark shadow. Well, it's actually kind of a mid-tone shadow. It's really not that heavy. And once we've got the basic areas of the first shade of shadow, we go a slightly darker shade, and we go through and go into more of the crevices, so under the lip, under the nose, under the hair, and just kind of going in the bits that go in a bit deeper into the shadow. So it's the same sort of process, but it's just adding a bit more depth every time we go, and it's just bit by bit adding a little bit more detail and a little bit more refinement. And you will see that over time this picture takes shape and becomes a 2D representation of a three-dimensional character or object fairly fast. So going through, adding the crevices and all this stuff, and then the next thing I will be doing, of course, is going another shade down. So when that time comes, I get to add a bit more detail through the eye, under the eyebrow, adding a bit of texture to the eyebrow, doing lines instead of broad shadow areas, because these sections with this very dark shade, much more kind of refining, detail adding bits. We're not doing broad sections with this because we've kind of done that with the other one. Now we're just kind of really shaping the final crevices and all that stuff, if that makes sense. And going through, adding details to things like the hair, things like the upper lip. I always shade the upper lip as darker than the bottom lip because it's shadowed. The eye balls themselves, and then under the cheeks and under the nose. Going through, adding some crevices to the clothing as well, so making sure that the folds are all addressed. And then the next thing I'll be doing is using my broad brush again to add some more darkness to certain areas. So as you can see, the back of the hair, some bits in the eyes. So it's a pretty rough sort of process, but as you can see, as it goes along, it refines it, adds more detail, and it becomes cleaner and clearer. So as that has made progress, I now can add some highlights, and this is what really makes it pop. It really makes the detail count. So I'm just using the same brush and just bringing up the detail. Now, unfortunately, in this recording, I'm not sure why, but the at this point on, the brush isn't moving. So as you can see, it's at the very middle bottom. The mouse doesn't move at all. I'm not sure why it hasn't picked that up. There's not much I can do about that, I'm sorry. Now in this part of the video, after I've added my broad highlights, I'm adding some rim lights, which is where I get a 100% opacity, much smaller brush with a white color. And I'm just going around the very edges and People who have seen my tutorials on rim lighting or in shading know that I use this quite a lot because it's a very efficient and effective method of getting a second source of lighting in that's quite strong, and it really adds a lot of space to the image. So this character has a lot of sort of front on lights and shades, but adding this rim light to the back of the image, the back edges of the image, really makes the image pop as if they're in this space where there's light coming from behind them as well. Refining details like some stubble on the face and erasing where it doesn't go, and then soon I'll be pretty ready for color. Now the color process is a bit interesting and I can't go into a huge amount of detail, so those who want to learn a bit more about it, feel free to check the link in the description which goes into it. But basically I'm using the clipping mask and just plastering in some overlay colors. So overlay and multiply as layer filters, things like darken, lighten, and screen. You kind of fiddle through them and find the ones that work to find the color that you want. And so once I've got the basic skin tone through, I'm going through and doing the same to the hair and the eyebrows, and then, you know, finding the tone and the saturation that I want of that color, going through as well through the clothes, and adding white and dark and all the bits and pieces that bring the color out. So it's interesting because going grayscale to color is actually one of the simplest methods of doing sort of Photoshop painting, because it's very, very fast and efficient. We get to do the shading and highlights first and just totally focus on that, and when we're happy with that, we just throw in the color and we can just find what works, rather than kind of going with color from the start. And if you make a mistake, then you've kind of got to there's a lot more correction to do, I should say. Anyways, I desaturate the eyes a bit, add a little more shading to the bottom lip, and at this point it's just tweaks, because I think in general I was pretty happy with the outcome, adding a bit of rose to the cheeks and a bit of light to the highlights, and overall, once I'm happy with the result, I end up with what I've finished here, and you can see that this is the character, this Sleazy Nobleman. Now I hope you enjoyed this little Let's Paint video. Now there are techniques and details that I couldn't go into detail, so rather than drag the whole video down and make it far too long, I thought I'd link to them in the description, but just kind of show a very fast, broad process on how I use a grayscale painting technique for those of you who haven't seen those tutorials before. And if you're interested, make sure to check out the link in the description. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me, and until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you later.